Hey guys, welcome back to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. I'm Jazz Marie, aka Naforo. So previously on the podcast, I was giving you a tour of Gather Lit Mag. Yeah, so listen back to that episode if you're curious what they have going on. And in terms of episodes, again, I tend to tack on some PS notes or additional thoughts that come to mind towards the very, very end. So in summaries, and I tend to repeat and reiterate things. Sometimes because I just want to point things out again, or sometimes I truly have thought I lost some bits of audio when I was playing it back, and then things like that. But oh well, so sometimes the episodes are on the chunkier side, you could say. Anyways, yeah, so it looks like we've hit the 100th episode of the Lit Mag Lab podcast. And yeah, well, technically, I don't really consider it the 100th episode, considering, I did some general update episodes, but I guess it counts, right? I covered additional information in those episodes for the most part. So yeah, that's cool. I didn't expect to do as many episodes as I did. So I know I kept saying, "Oh, I'll take a break," and things like that. So, I ended up getting, along the way some really lovely messages from, founding editors and others in the community about the series, that they enjoyed it and got something out of it, had a takeaway from it or learned something new or thought about something, so that's great. Even if it was just a couple people, that is absolutely meaningful, that it helped them in some way or form. And yeah, so I was trying to figure out something fun to do for the 100th episode, right? And considering Christmas is coming up and it's December, right? But I'm so sorry, guys. I've got nothing super special for this 100th episode. I know I did some things like that on other series I've done on podcasts, but you're probably bummed out. Like, Jazz, you're supposed to be creative. Come up with something, fun for the 100th episode of this podcast. And I got nothing. But others seem to be enjoying these coverage episodes, so I'm going to try and fit in a couple more before the end of the year here. And yeah, time flies really fast, guys. It's already 2025, and then January is around the corner, my birthday and other stuff. So yeah, so let's get started here. So on my screen, you may be watching on YouTube, and I know less and less are using Spotify, or considering a lot have ditched it or moved to another platform. But I do know some still follow the podcast out there, so I just distribute it through as many channels as possible. So if you're not huge on Spotify, then a fan of it anymore or anything like that, yeah, I plugged in these episodes to other channels, so YouTube. You can even watch the videos, my screen shares on Substack too. So just keep that in mind. And then the audio version goes out, without the video, to other channels too. Like, I think you can listen to the audio version on Apple and elsewhere. I don't know if they'll ever have video capabilities on some other of the channels this goes out to. But yeah, so let's get started here. Today we are going to be covering Moss Puppy Magazine, right? So let's take a look at their Chill Subs overview page and learn more about them, yeah? So it looks like they've been bookmarked 355 times to date as of December 2025. They do have some recommendations here in the rating section of Chill Subs. So it says here, great editors, bold and weird, actually inclusive. Someone said, I just love them. Essentially, a damn good read, new writer friendly, and beautiful design. So that's really great to see. It seems there's a lot of positive feedback on Moss Puppy Magazine. And yeah, I have followed them for quite some time, and I think they just did a revamp of their website. So we'll check it out in a bit here after going over the overview a little bit. So the vibe is picky but possible. There's no fee to submit. They do have print issues, right? The response time, the editor reported data is 14 days to get back to others typically. But Chill Subs Tracker, it's been about 16 days. And yeah, it's about the same, close to that. Those who track their decision in Chill Subs, the tracker there. The acceptance rate, so nothing editor reported, but Chill Subs Tracker showing for those who, inputted their decision through it, 39.42%. Yeah. So, yeah, about a 40% acceptance rate. They were founded in 2021, and it says here Their goal as a literary magazine, and they're based in the US again, is to feature and share literature that defies norms, challenges conventions, and embraces the unsettlingly beautiful and oddly innovative. They are a platform for emerging writers and artists to share their unique perspectives and voices with a commitment to embracing and supporting diverse voices. Their core values guide everything they do, shaping their vision and ensuring that they provide a literary haven that nurtures creativity, fosters community, and amplifies marginalized voices. So yeah, absolutely. I think Moss Puppy Magazine, if you go on their social media feed, Instagram, they absolutely, I think, do that, and strive to do that. Really cool, issues. From what I've seen, I haven't grabbed any to date, but absolutely, from the feeds, the photos, and what I've seen, out on their channels, it looks like they have beautiful issues. Absolutely, and absolutely the founding editor takes a lot of care and time and energy into the publication, without a doubt. Yeah. So, industry ranking. So, the fish list, I have an episode on what the fish list is. It's showing 926 out of 1,830. Just know, I think the fish list just came out, right? The most current one. So, I don't know when these industry rankings are updated. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. And then again, the editor in chief is Melissa Martini. Yeah, the founding editor. So I apologize if I mispronounce any names again. And it looks like they appeared on the collection where the cool kids are submitting their writing these days in Chill Subs, one of their list. They don't have any calls open right now, but we'll check out their website in a little bit here. And yeah, just something to keep in mind. So while they may not be open right now, and something that a lot of lit magazine journals do, not necessarily always on their website or elsewhere, sometimes on their social media feed, they'll say, hey guys, we're going to be open, at this point in time, maybe, it's the end of the year now. So next year, right? Moss Puppy Magazine, right? If you go out to their Instagram, right? It states here, submissions for issue 10 open on January 1st, 2026. So yeah, they will have their call for submissions open, in the new year. Absolutely. So yeah, it's 1-2 bookmark. Check out if you're interested. There's no fee to submit to them. Let's head over, back to Chill Subs real quick. Let's look at the stats, right? So yeah, there, it looks like there were 150 submissions tracked, accepted 54, rejected 83, pending 10, withdrawn 3. So yeah, again, this isn't all the submissions that they've ever received, but just again, those who have a Chill Subs account and maybe track their decision through that helpful tracker they have tool. Yeah. So yeah, and so they do have a duotrope listing again, right? So just founded again July 2021. So I will read this off because it's different from what they had. I think that was like more so their mission statement that I just read for you on Chill Subs. So they state here, right? They are curly haired swamp creatures howling into the moonlight, doggy paddling and barking at toads and flies. They want your weird, muddy, and messy. The turtles without shells, boiled frogs, and mushroom capped fairies. Show us what's in your swamp. So I like that. It's a very creative, when you're creating, your about and mission statements, right? You really want to have it highlight, what your publication is about. So I think that's very fun. And the name itself is very fun too, Moss Puppy Magazine, right? And yeah, so you can see here, we talked about this towards the end of the past episode, right? A duotrope has this great field now in regards to AI policies, right? So human created work only, no AI use allowed, right? So yeah, we'll take a look at their website. Again, duotrope does a good job of, checking in on lit magazine journals and their calls and making sure the listing information is up to date. So again, they're not open right now, Moss Puppy, but January 1st, 2026, they'll be back open, right? It looks like. So yeah, this is their website. Now it looked completely different a bit, in the past. They just again did a revamp of their website, and I think it looks pretty awesome. Love this. You can see on my screen if you're watching again on the screen recording. So, uh, this green puppy, right? Moss Puppy Magazine, right? So I love how some lit magazine journals totally they have maybe, you could say a mascot or a character of some kind for their publication, and it could be tying into their logo or their name, and it's just a lot of fun. I myself, you guys know, I've had Chihuahuas over the years, so I love puppies. I love smaller dog breeds predominantly. And yeah, so I think their vibe is really fun and yeah, very joyful, right? Community and community focused. That's what I get from it, I think it's very inviting and fun, their whole magazine. So yeah, again, it says here on their front page right there, biannual themed literary magazine featuring prose, poetry, and visual arts. So they have read the latest issue on the front. We'll check that in a bit. So yeah, again, they have their goal reiterated here on their website. Always good, right? And right, a submit button and submission guidelines. And we scroll further, right? So they added some new things on their website design and everything, right? So there is now embeds, right, which I really love, and we'll take a look at the other parts of their website here in a bit, and yeah, but I want to take a look at the submission guidelines for you guys first. So yeah, let's take a look at the submission guidelines first, and yeah, so it goes here. So yeah, this was the previous call that they just closed out, issue 9. The theme was echoed howls. So I think what Moss Puppy magazine does that's really fun is they have various themes, and they also have this, vibe words and imagery, and I've thought about doing something, like a word mood board myself for some calls going forwards, just based on some things I saw with, our last window of my own lit mag, right? Dippy. I really like that. I think that's great, right? A vibe, words, and imagery board, right? So others get a sense of the, tones and notes of the issue, what to go for. Because sometimes if you just have one word, or something like that, maybe that's not enough. You want to maybe go a bit further, right? So they have, for echoed howls, right? That issue call they had, right? You can see that window was July 1st, 2025 to October 1st, right? So they're saying howling wind, moonlight in distance, forest at dusk, echoes in empty halls, prayers left unanswered, wolves, ghost, and starlight, abandoned radios, static and fading signals, cold cliffs, fog. And then they have themes, tones, and angles, right? Primal longing, emotional rawness, repetition and reverberation, grief and memory, the ache of solitude, liminal spaces, thresholds, in betweens, the veil, ancestral voices and distant songs, the search for belonging in silence, animal instinct, transformation, shapeshifting, oracles, prophecies, forgotten gods, the sound of reaching out and what comes back. I'm bummed I missed this call, guys, so I don't know if you guys check out my feed, but some of you where I did a lot of wolf art, the past couple of years. I don't know, like digital. I do digital collage art, and some, you could say, abstract mirror art, digital collages and some video designs and things of that nature a lot. So wolf art was like a huge part of, the past few years, a little bit with some of the products I did, even the poetry world visually, and yeah, I don't know what it is about wolves personally. I think, I just always thought they're pretty cool, werewolves and stuff. I think it's interesting. One of my all time favorite movies, I think I mentioned this podcast, was The American Werewolf in Paris, right? And of course, there's American Werewolf in London, but I think I prefer The American Werewolf in Paris. It was just, pretty interesting, right? The scenes with the club and the transformation and all of that. And, it was like dark with notes of comedy in it, but yeah, I don't know. I thought that movie was always, one I'd watch, a couple times. And yeah, so yeah, and I think growing up, there was this memorable small painting we always had, and one part of my childhood home that was like a wolf. I think it was like a white wolf howling, and then there was like a desert background, almost like Arizona. And I used to just think about that a lot. I don't know, whenever I would like stare at it and stuff. It's very small and very, cool. So I always remembered that. I think that's where it sort of spawned from. I was thinking about that. Yeah. Anyways, I think Moonlight is beautiful. Wolves are pretty interesting and fascinating, themselves, and werewolves in general, right? It's not Halloween or anything like that, but we were talking a little bit about dark, right? Ghost stories, right? A couple episodes back, and, some things of that nature. So, anyways, yeah, so I think this is really nice that they did this, the vibe and words, imagery, themes, tones, and angles, and then expand the theme explores longing, connection, isolation, the unknown. It asks what it means to speak into the void, to call for someone who may not be there, and to hear Only yourself echoed back. It is about the tension between presence and absence, between reaching out and being met with silence. A howl can be grief, warning, prayer, or celebration, but always it is a reaching. Who do we become when we are unheard? What remains when sound fades and only the echo lingers? So I really love that. I really love that they have this theme section here, right? And they expand, and I think that it's really written quite well, and laid out very organized. So that's great. So if we scroll down, I believe again, the above, right? They do this for every issue, right? So they're up to issue 9, and they've been around since 2021, right? So right, 4 years, right, coming up on here, right? And they're going to be entering their 5th year, so that's awesome. So submission guidelines, right? So this is the most important thing. You should never, never, ever skip, when submitting to a literary journal. You always should read it, carefully. So it states here in the guidelines, right? They do have an age limit, right? You must be 18 plus to submit. They don't want, to see any work that, encourages, hate or, attacks anyone and things of that nature, right? As you can see on my screen. And they, again, do not accept AI generated work. And if your work is not accepted, you have to wait until the following submission period or window to submit again. Simultaneous submissions are encouraged. Just withdraw by email if it's accepted elsewhere. A section here. So they said, no, you cannot submit previously published work to them. They asked for first North American serial rights and credit if it's been, placed elsewhere in the future. Rights revert back to the writer after publication. And yeah, on the left-hand side, right, we have the schedule, right? So they have autumn issue submissions open from July 1st to October with a release date of November. Spring issue submissions open from January 1st to April 1st with a release date of May. Response time. So it looks like within 2 weeks, it says please reach out if you have not received a response more than 2 weeks after submitting. So yeah, I think this is what's nice. Again, I was sort of mentioning this on the past podcast episode a bit. To have a submission schedule or windows, recurring windows are nice because then, writers, right, or, even artists, yeah, hey, this lit mag has these calls each year. This is their windows. This is when I should, look out for their next call window, make sure I submit if I'm really interested in seeing the next theme they have, the next window. It's good to, if you're starting a literary journal, to plan in advance, to chart things out, or to stick to a schedule. When you stick to a schedule, you can really stay organized. However, I know for a lot of lit magazine journals starting out, sometimes you can't really stick to a schedule because, the volume, right? Your volume may not be, sometimes you may have to extend call if you don't have, the issue filled quite yet and things like that, So yeah, and some lit magazine journals do that and even have a schedule still. But I think it's good to have one, recurring windows. I think sometimes it's hard for some founding editors to do this, or, those who don't have a staff or volunteer team of any kind. But I like seeing this. It's good idea, I think, absolutely, to have a schedule, and recurring windows are easy to, post, right, or to maintain in like chill subs, right, where editors can update that, or even, the duotrope teams listings, right? Recurring windows are nice to see, very easy to say, yeah, this is our window, this is when we're always open, others can remember that. So yeah, so it looks like they have 3 sections here beneath that, right, beneath the schedule and guidelines: poetry, prose, and visual art. So they have their formatting guidelines here, right? Preferred formatting for poetry is 12-point font, Times New Roman, single space. You can submit up to 3 poems separately using the appropriate Google form. So it looks like Moss Puppy Magazine is using a Google form, right? Google intake forms. Now, on this podcast, we've discussed the disadvantages of using a Google form. Now, it's totally okay, to do that. I'm not saying anything like that, but there are challenges with Google Forms, right? There are, I feel, a lot of great systems out there and software, right, that have just launched this year, especially, that are great, lovely alternatives to Google Forms, right? One of those being, right, Subfolio, and I mentioned on this podcast, right, Dapple, other ones, right? So totally, again, if you're listening to this episode, you're maybe a founding editor or someone just interested, right, check out Subfolio. They have, some fairly reasonable, plans available, even Dapple, and, submittable, right, I was trying to cover submittable alternatives, right, for those most lit magazine journals who use submittable are on the CLMP membership. But even, Dapple, Subfolio, right, they have, discounts, right, on the CLMP membership, and also, Duo Suma, right, part of Duotrope. So yeah, totally listen back to, the episode of Subfolio, the Q&As they've been doing with the founders of the Submission Man systems again. There are more on the way, by the way. So yeah. So it says, right, submit up to 3 poems separately using the appropriate Google form. Poems can appear within one document, but should be submitted separately for organizational purposes. Yeah, so that's the thing. I think, with Google Forms, sometimes it's hard to organize things, right? To keep tabs on everything. It can be hard, to do that. So I do like submission management systems, right? Pros, right? So they have preferred formatting. Yeah, it says 12-point font Times New Roman, like poetry, right? Double spaced and indented. Submit up to 3,000 words of prose using, right, the appropriate Google form. Prose can appear within one document, but should be submitted separately again for organizational purposes. Visual art, right? It says please submit up to 3 pieces of art separately using the appropriate Google form. Pieces should not appear within one document. Upload separate image files for organizational purposes. And so, in regards to the poetry, prose, and visual art sections here in the guidelines, I think it is always a good idea to specify, preferred submission file types, for poetry, prose, right, a Word doc, PDF, or they, what file types do they want to see? And yeah, even with, visual art, right, the image file types, I think it's good to specify that because totally, at the LitMag I have ran, right, Dippity, LitMag, right, totally, we've seen some bizarre file types now and then, when we didn't have, a submission man system to require only or permit certain types of file types inside the system, right? And yeah, so that's the thing, I think, which file types are allowed and permitted. Obviously, most are aware Word doc, PDF, and, and then, for visual art, right, they say pieces should not appear within the document, but, and uploading separate image files. But I think it's good to, right, specify the, uh, for visual art, right, the individual file types too that are permitted or preferred, right? Because I've seen some weird file types now and then, come through submission windows, myself. So yeah. So the thing about visual art, I think it'd be good to know, right? Are they talking about, illustration work, photography, or, things of that nature? Just specifying, right? Maybe, maybe the type of art styles they're looking for, or open to everything basically in terms of visual art. Of course, they don't accept AI work or anything like that nature. But yeah, I think some lit magazine journals they do specify like the image, file specifications like 300 DPI and things of that nature. But yeah, so anyways, I think that's awesome that they have visual art call, and poetry, prose are their focuses. So yeah, that's my only thing. I think it absolutely is hard to juggle, Google Forms, so I don't recommend it. It's like, you know, one thing that absolutely, I think a lot of lit magazine journals should get off of because it's very, very tough to manage as you grow and grow over time. And the nice thing again about, a system of some kind like maybe Subfolio is that you can have an archive over time, right, established and find everything, for nomination events and all of that, right? And yeah. So yeah, and the Apple I share in this podcast has a cool, visual card, right? So you can easily identify pieces with visual art and submissions of that nature. So yeah, they have, right, the buttons here. So above that, right, they have don't forget to include content warnings in your submissions and a thank you, right, to others. So when you click on submit poetry, let's see if it takes us out to a form. So yeah, this is how they have it set up. They're typically, individual Google forms, it looks like, for prose, poetry, and visual art for each call that they have to create. And yeah. Of course, Google Forms is free to use, right? You can save money by, using Google Forms, but, there absolutely are, Safoli has like a $10 a month plan. And yeah, so depending upon your volume, right? There are different plans, systems have, that you could leverage, right, to minimize, juggling forms. And yeah, I think it also can help improve your, response time back to submitters and answering their questions collectively, alongside their submission. So yeah, reading and responding. So the process and timeline, right? So I think it's great that they have this when you scroll further down. So when submissions open, their reading process operates on a 2-week cycle. Their team of readers is dedicated to thoroughly reviewing each submission, and they always have at least 1 week to read through the total submissions from the previous week. They have weekly voting and response timeline here, right? So votes from their reading team are due every Saturday for submissions received during the previous week. This ensures that each submission is given careful consideration within a structured time frame. Every Sunday, the founding editor, Melissa, sends out response emails. For declined submissions, they use a BCC'd batch template, right? So blind copied batch template response to officially manage the volume of submissions they receive. Accepted submissions are responded to individually, though they still utilize a template to maintain consistency. So yeah, that's again what's really great about, having a volunteer team, right? You can have others, vote, get typically write their thoughts on the submission collectively. Every limit is a bit different, and whether they use some submission management systems, right? For example, I'm not sure if Moss Puppy uses a scoring system or just a vote of kind, saying yes or no. But submission man systems, have those features and capabilities. I think it's a bit easier to collectively see, a reading team's, messages and communications like that, and to, manage all of your templates and decision letters in the system. I know when I was, back on Google Forms myself, when I started my Lit Mag, I had basically a Word document with all our templates, all of our messages, and it was really hard to juggle all of that, and then like emails, and finding those emails that I had, and up, yeah, it was just a lot of that, and still jumping back and forth between things. It was just not centrally, everything located. So of course I share in this podcast, my journey trying different systems, and what I settled on, to date, right? Subfolio, but a lot of different options out there. Ola just launched again this year. Very cool, right? Just a couple episodes back, I covered that a little bit. So yeah, check those out if you're listening to this podcast. The different submission systems that have launched this year, especially a lot of great new ones, and features in them. So it says, right, they have pop-up issues. So that's interesting. So it says, please note that pop-up issues follow a different response process than the regular submissions. For pop-ups, they typically collect all submissions during the submission window, usually about 1 month, and send responses the following month due to their smaller and more concentrated nature. So yeah, it looks like they do pop-up issues. They have themed call issues too, and things of that nature. So that's awesome. Yeah, so if we scroll further down on their website, right, and the cute, green puppy here, right? So yeah, on the right, Moss Puppy magazine, right, is eager to expand its network and is proud to collaborate with affiliates who share their passion. So you can see here they have a button, right, become a sponsor and then become an affiliate. So, yeah, some lit magazine journals, they have, you could say regular Patreon contributors, things of that nature I share in this podcast, or they have sponsors or affiliates or those who support, right, their mission and publication. Totally, I've seen that. So let's just click on it to see. I'm just curious, what this takes us out to. And yeah, so, they have a contact form, right? And yeah, think about this, if you're Lit Journal, maybe, you may be open to, sponsors or affiliates or, partnerships of some kind, yeah, it's good to have, some sort of contact form regarding that. And yeah, so I'm going to go back here to where it was. And yeah, become an affiliate. Let's click on that and see what that, yeah, so they both take you out to a contact form. I think they also have a page. Oh, and here they have like postcards from Moss Puppy and some fun things like that, right? Holiday postcards. So yeah, I think they also have a a page where they have, some of their, yeah, this is it, the support page. This is what I was looking for. So they have a support page here, right, that is on their sponsors and affiliates here, right? So you can see what that looks like. And something that they did, which is, I think is nice, right? They have some stats here, right, on their website, right? How many site sessions they've had collectively, right? It's showing 8,000. I'm not sure when the last time this was updated, the stats, but 8,000 annual unique visitors, 5,000 non-followers reach 3,000. IG stats, followers reach 1,000, accounts reach 4,000. Of course, that fluctuates, over time. But yeah, so you can see they have, reached, others all over the world, it looks like, right? Which is really cool to see. So yeah, partnerships are, I think, are a good way for Lit magazine journals to sustain themselves, and beyond Patreon, right? So sponsors and affiliates, it's good to see things like that, right? So yeah, I think that's cool, yeah. And yeah, so it looks like they have affiliates for, book cover design and stuff. Yeah, and things of that nature. So yeah, so I think that's unique. I don't think we've seen a Lit Mag journal that covered today on this podcast that had anything like this, to this extent, right? Sponsors and affiliates, maybe one of them, I can't remember. But yeah. Anyways, I think this is something to keep in mind. You could have like a inbox form for others who are interested, maybe in becoming a sponsor, partnering, or becoming an affiliate of some kind. Yeah. So let's go back. I think we covered everything on submission guidelines, right? Let's go back here. Yeah, so I think we covered everything on submission guidelines. So at the bottom most banner of their page, right? The repeat banner on the bottom of their site. So they have quick links, right? And then they have latest issues, right? So, the linkage to them, right? 9876, and then you can go to all issues. So yeah. And yeah, let's go to all issues. Let's go to read. I think this takes you to read, right? Moss puppy issues. And yeah, so let's just go to all issues and take a look at them for you guys. So yeah, I think this is what really nice they've done with the revamp of their website again. So, you can scroll down and now they have embeds, embeddable PDFs on here. So if we click into these, I'll click into issue 7 Boneyard, and the other ones too, just so you can see, right? So this one's from autumn 2024, issue 7 Boneyard. And yeah, may take some time. I've had some slow loading issues on my end, not necessarily their site. So yeah, you can see here the Boneyard, Moss Puppy. So I think it's always a good idea, if you're listening to this, you're going to start your own Lit Mag journal, to check out some Lit magazine journals, pick them up, grab issues, print and online, see the layout and structure of them. And, I've done some flip throughs on other channels of my own literary magazine, right, Dippity, but it's always a good idea to do that, before starting your own. I think even submitters like to see this, right? They like to see issue samplers or to see them available online and maybe pick up print if they really want to, I think that's great that they do this. Now, we did this at the Lit Mag I run, right, Dippity. I had embeds lined up. The only reason I got rid of all our, most of our embeds, now we just have one issue sampler, is because the platform had changed it where they, cut off how many free ones on their most free limited plan, right, was. I think it was YUMPU, right, that platform. So, yeah, they cut back how many you could have on their free plan. So then it was like, and then eventually I got off the paid plan because I just didn't want to take on that additional cost. But yeah, I kept up the issue sampler of Antique Road Ship, the one we did, right, at Dippity. And yeah, so others can get a sense of our issues, our, things like that, our sections. And of course, I'm looking to do a relaunch of, Dippity, hopefully in 2026. So yeah. Anyways, this is really cool. I think their issues are very organized and very, consistent, right? The layout and format and everything. So you can see they have cover art, right? Book cover art, the artist credits here, editor-in-chief, right? Business development lead, everyone on the team that was involved, poetry team, prose team, art team, the social media team they have, the ISBN, right? And imprint, lulu.com, right? So they are using a POD service, right? Print on demand, and that's fine. A lot of Lit magazine journals do that. It is really expensive nowadays, if you were to do a traditional publishing house, unless you're able to finance that yourself. It is really expensive to do that, do binding and printing all of yourself, all in house. So, yeah, a lot of lit magazine journals do that. I do have a list and a couple episodes where I cover my experience with PODs, right? And yeah, so check that out. A lot of lit magazine journals for their series, right, have ISSNs. But for ISBNs, I think are important, right? Especially if you want to have them distributed, shelved elsewhere, or work with major distribution partners and things of that nature. It's a good idea to have that. Yeah, and yeah, so I'm obviously not going to go through all of it, but there's always typically a letter from the editor, right, in the start of an issue. You can see they have the table of contents. I think they had affiliates and supporters, and yeah. So very, very great organized issues here. The artwork looks very cool. So I'm obviously not going to go through all of it, but you can see, right, they have it very organized and laid out. And I think it's great that they've gone and added these embeds right here. Now, to do this right, there are a couple different platforms you can use. I've covered some on the podcast. I think it was episode 33, the PDF, readers and things like that. Also, I did a separate episode on Zacked editions, some various platforms that focus more so on subscriptions. But also, I created recently 2 lists on the Lit Mag Lab, right? Substack, where I share platforms that focus on just embeds, improving the reading experience like this, and ones that flip side to side even, and also, like a book, book flipping, experience, and then magazine flipping experience, right, too. And then also a list of platforms that focus more so on, subscriptions, right, and yeah, things like that, right, where they give you like maybe a 60-40 split from subscriptions and purchases, right, digitally. But yeah, some lit magazine journals totally, sometimes they offer samples of all, share the full back issues, right, and I think that's nice, and then others can just pick up the print version if they'd like. So I think beneath this one, right, they have a fun playlist for each issue, which is nice. I love doing that myself. As you guys know, we did that too at Dippity, creating some song recs around the issues. So yeah, if we go to purchase a printed copy, right, it's going to take us out here. They have all their issues, it looks like, in lulu.com. And then there's, yeah, that's what they have. I do see the age 18 plus, right, on some of the issues, right? Yeah. So if we go back here, yeah, again, I was clicking on a back issue because I was just curious if a back issue was available or if all of these were available to read for free digitally. And yeah, so yeah, it looks like they have all these embeds that are up available to read for free digitally. Now, yeah, not everyone does this. I know some lit magazine journals just have one issue sampler and then they have the others paywalled or available through a subscription platform of some kind, right? And I think we also covered on this podcast, right? Brie, right? They help, literary magazines, indie publishers, right? With the ebook, right, distribution, digital distribution to schools and libraries, right, of issues as well. So yeah, it's really up to you. I think it's great that they did this so others can, read the issues, understand what they typically publish, get a feel for the issues and everything, the contents of it, right? Issue 9 was their most recent release for 2025. We can click into it. Obviously, I'm not going to scroll through. You could, check these out in your downtime. But yeah, if you look at them back to back to back, you can see they're very consistent at Moss Puppy Magazine with the, everything, the layout, the sections, and yeah. So yeah, of course, you can always purchase a printed copy at the bottom. So yeah, they've done a good job, I think, with their layout. And you can read through it. I'm not going to obviously do that or read issues on this podcast, but just trying to point out things in terms of design, layout, and yeah, I don't think we covered a bunch of lit magazine journals on this podcast that have anything like this with the embeddable PDFs and that. So again, there are also some. I think they're using WordPress for their website. I could be wrong, but WordPress also has like a plugin widget marketplace, right? That has PDF embed tools and stuff too, I think, and different platforms. So yeah, and I think it's really stellar what Moss Puppy Magazine has done, with each issue, right? The consistency, the layout, the design, the artwork's really cool, and photography, right? So yeah, it looks like they do have, a mix between artwork, in terms of visual art, photography, and, like illustrative work, it looks like, as well. So that's great. So again, I think Moss Puppy always, on social media, I'm like, oh, I wonder what their next theme's going to be, because it always sounds really cool, the names of them, right? So they have issue 9, Echoed Howls, issue 8, Amberfields, issue 7 was the Boneyard again, and issue 6, Slither slash Swim, issue 5, Whimsical Woodland, issue 4, Caged, issue 3 was Blades, issue 2, Puppy Love, issue 1, Swampland. So yeah, you can see that, and I think Swampland was tying back to that maybe description we saw in right, Duotrope a little bit, right, about them. So that's cool. I think they go to show you, right, again, you can have some really fun themed issues, right? And yeah, we did this at Dipty too, like different themed issues. Our last issue from our legacy issues was cat themed, right? For instance, although I have chihuahuas, right, or I've had chihuahuas over the years, right? I know my dog was angry at me. It was like, why did I'm just joking, of course, but it's like, why didn't I'm just picturing what he would have said to me? Why didn't you do a chihuahua themed lit mag, Jazz? Right? Why didn't you do it? And yeah, he's like, why didn't you do? He's probably like in his mind, if he could talk, right? He'd be like, why didn't you do a Chihuahua themed literary magazine issue? I don't know if there is a lit mag or journal that's ever done a Chihuahua themed, literary arts issue, but I thought about it. I had considered it, but I did cats instead, because I know, just like a lot of others in the community that I knew, they were like, had cats predominantly. So I was like, that I knew, I was like, yeah. So, anyways, so yeah, and also, I think it was really cool. I'll share, the other day I saw like someone picked up like 5 of those, our legacy issues, cat issues, and some of the older issues. So that was really awesome to see. And yeah, so I think absolutely, it's important to make sure, when you have back issues like Moss Puppy has, right, to, highlight them, to make sure others can still access them. Accessibility is so important in terms of like, others who access your website. You have to make sure that everyone can, read it, in a very nice format and layout. Downloadable PDFs, they can, for very long issues, they can be really hard to read, but I think it's nice to have, your publication available in more than one format. So again, I think it's really great that they did this, full view of them, so others can just see, what their issues are about, get a feel of it, future submitters, those interested. So yeah, I think it's nice. So, just keep that in mind, if you're going to start Lit Mag, are you going to offer, just a one issue sampler, which is fine, or you're going to share all back issues, over time, and then just give others the option to purchase print, right? Think about that. I think when you have maybe just a 1 or 2 issue samplers, right? I think you then have the ability to more so do maybe, leverage subscription platforms that exist. And yeah, some of those platforms, they have to vet your publication, approve your publication into their platform. But yeah, I think it's another way to, generate, some additional, right, coverage of operational expenses by offering things through other platforms like subscription based for digitally. So yeah, dig through something of the other episodes if you listen to this podcast. I also recently again created 2 lists tied to that, because there are a lot of really cool platforms out there. Some do cost some money, but some don't. Sometimes they just split the subscription, um, having the subscriber amount with you, right? And like 60-40 splits. I've seen 50-50, 70-30 even, So yeah, so there are, I think it's always a good idea to get your publication to more platforms digitally and, and in print, you know. So yeah, there are a lot of ways to do that now. I know others don't necessarily always like picking up print issues. They like to see the issue first. So I think it's really awesome that Moss Puppy did this, adjusted the layout of their publication. And yeah, so that's really great. So yeah, so we covered Read, right? Moss Puppy magazine issues. What are the pop-up issues? Let's click on that. So this is cool. They even have the embeds set up for their pop-up volumes. So yeah, it looks like they had a Pride volume, the Hyper Moss Theorem, Cedar with Kelly Lage. So yeah, so they've had some fun pop-up issues. So aside from their themed issues, right? I guess these are themed too, but they're like a little bit, fun ones. Very, I think they said their time span is different for these, right? So these pop-up issues, I actually had pop-ups blocked, so I had to go in my browser and allow it to open. But yeah, once I did that, it opened up. So yeah. Um, so yeah, this is cool, right? So they have it looks like an incredible collection of stories and artwork. So you can read it digitally, or you can of course buy the print edition, right? So they give the option. That's really nice. And yeah, so they've done some really cool pop-up issues. And yeah, let me go back to here, right? So on the right-hand side, right? So pop-up issues, right? That just entails, right? They follow a different response process than their regular submissions. They typically collect all submissions during the submission window, usually about 1 month. And then they send responses the following month. So they're basically smaller and more concentrated in nature, right? So they're pop-up issues, right? So yeah, that's awesome. Again, you can do different series of your lit manga journal, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be solely, aside from a main series, you can do like spin-off series, pop-up issues like Moss Puppy. I think that's cool. They have a press. Let's take a look at what this is. Yeah. I wonder what this entails. So yeah, so Moss Puppy magazine press. So it looks like, right, it says click on an interview to dive into the vision process and playful spirit behind Moss Puppy. So, so this is like a collection of interviews and media features they've had, where the founder and editor in chief, Melissa Martini, shares insight right behind the magazine. So that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, some lit magazine journals plug that in, additional media interviews or chats they've had on other channels. So that's great. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it under read, right? We've covered all of that. Submit, we've covered that. Support, right? We've covered that. And about, so their team, their masthead section, right? And yeah, some lit magazine journals have it as their team, their staff, their masthead, but always good to have it visibly. So this is Melissa Martini, the founder and editor in chief. She is a short fiction writer in Capricorn from New Jersey. She studied creative writing in both undergrad and graduate school at Seton Hall University. Currently, she's again, right, is the editor in chief of Moss Puppy. So yeah, again, and then if you scroll further down, they have their entire team and staff here, right? So that's awesome, right? They have a whole team behind Moss Puppy, and that's great. So yeah, if you're gonna start a literary journal, yeah, if you're, someone who maybe, wants to have a volunteer staff, to have others involved in the decision process, the review process, I think it does help, to see others' thoughts on pieces, to collectively do that with a reading team is a lot of fun too. Again, I cover on this podcast, ways to, find, even if you're looking for opportunities into entering the lit mag space or publication space, right? Sometimes it just helps to, get a taste of it, right? Volunteer on a staff, join one, a position you're interested in. I have, some postings on that, some episodes covering that, and also how to post, open calls, for, opportunities aside from social media. Of course, some lit magazine journals do join the CLMP membership to do that. And yeah, not all lit magazine journals are, CLMP has an additional fee every year for doing that. It's not like you have to, but there are benefits to becoming a member of CLMP, right? And right, they have a page where you can share calls and stay informed, keep in the loop on what's happening in the lit mag world. So yeah, that's awesome. Their volunteer staff, they have their reading team listed here, right? Everyone involved, right? Who handles their social media. So yeah. And of course, some solo editors do, everything themselves, but I think it's really nice to have a volunteer team or a team, for your literary journal. Consider, like if you're an editor in chief and let's say you need to take a break or step away, it's good to maybe have like an editorial assistant. Some lit magazine journals have managing editors, aside from the reading team, just, yeah, backup support, right? I think it's always great to keep calls going, to keep the issues flowing and the process on track, right? Especially if you have tight windows or schedule you're following. Yeah. So we did about their team contributors. So they have a contributors section, right? I think which highlights, each issue's contributors. If we click on the covers, right, it takes you out to, I believe, a list of names. Yeah, so that's great that they did that, so everyone can see, who was in each issue, from the past. And yeah, that's really great. So you can see every writer, artist involved in the publication. So I like seeing that, the full list of names, rather than just a couple, right? They have everyone, listed out, right? So great, yeah, really awesome cover art again, and great layout. If you scroll through, dive in further, I'm not going to go through the whole issue for you guys, but totally highly recommend you check out these issues, the embeds they've just added to their new website launch design. And I think it is a improvement from what they last had. It's a very friendly to reading it. I think some embeds they have more of a scroll, and some again have like a flip type capabilities. So just keep that in mind if you're going to choose one and start your own lit mag journal too. A lot of great ones out there, or ways to do this, thanks to technology, right? So I think it's so important again to do something like this, to give samples or examples of issues. It doesn't necessarily have to be the whole series or every single issue that was released, but at least one, at least one or two or something. Those are interested in it can see. And yeah, so I think for lit magazine journals, I know some they post some pieces online individually and their date, right, and feature them on the site as well. Aside for that, or maybe do reshares on a Substack. So as I share in this podcast, so a lot of different things you can do. But yeah, I think this is a great example of really showcasing the importance of giving others a full look at past issues. Right, that's really awesome that they do that. And yeah, so nominations, right? So they do nominate. So Moss Puppy does partake in nomination events. Great to see. So again, right? I'm not gonna go through all of these, but yeah, it's another great way. If you're a founding editor, and you see Lit Magazine Journals nominate for work, you can find out. Sometimes you discover, more nomination events this way too. I think one on their social media feed that I just came across that I wasn't aware of, this year that happened was the Genre Punk awards nominations. So that's one I added just recently to the new list I updated. And yeah, for founding editors. So there are a lot of nomination events again across the year, especially towards the middle and end of the year. That's especially where they close out, right, the nomination events or take place, the windows. So yeah, if you're interested, check out the Lit Mag Lab Substack. I have a list of like the main ones that I'm aware of in terms of the ones founding editors, right, can nominate work for, and also some that are tied to CLMP even too. They have award events at CLMP, right, the Community of Literary Magazines and Presses. So yeah, they have on their social media feed, right, on Moss Puppy, have done a great job of showcasing all their nomination events too, not just on their website, but they share as many places as possible, it looks like, right? So yeah, they have a shop. And yeah, so most again lit magazine journals have a fun merch store of some kind. We have like stickers here, yeah, and a hoodie, and yeah, some fun things, absolutely mug. And yeah, so I think that's great, a bookmark. And yeah, so something I've never seen a lit mag or journal to date have, this is the first, but they have a fan art section, so that's awesome. I think that's really cool. So yeah, if we click into this fan art section, you can see it looks like they have some kid fan art, yeah, of Moss Puppy that was here, right? So that's cool. Tying into their sort of mascot, right? Their mascot or character, right? Moss Puppy. So yeah, that's really cool, right? So yeah, again, just keep in mind, right, in terms of Moss Puppy magazine, right? They do have though, a submission, age requirement here, right? So you must be 18 plus to submit. Even despite that, the fan art I think may have led you to believe maybe they allow younger submitters to partake, but no, just like anyone I think who sees Moss Puppy, or I think you can get inspired by sometimes mascots and characters you see, and sometimes kids hear Moss Puppy. Yeah, anyways, so yeah, just keep in mind again, you must be 18 plus to submit though to Moss Puppy Magazine. And yeah, so that's it. I think they have a lot of awesome issues that they've done to date, 9 issues. That's really cool. And yeah, they were founded in 2021. So yeah, that's quite a lot of issues. So again, I really think they do a great job of highlighting that you can be really playful and fun with your themes, even cover some rather important topics like grief and memory, right? And yeah, um, in Moss Puppy, if you read the letters, from the editor, Melissa, right, she really absolutely does, you can tell really cares about the publication and the issues. And again, a lot of editors, right? They invest a lot of time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears into their publications. So yeah, I think Moss Puppy Magazine is absolutely one of the lit mags out there that's really fun and cool, right? They don't specify, but they don't pay others for their work to date as of 2025. I don't know if that's ever going to change, but there's no fee to submit to them, so that's awesome. Yeah, so overall they have really cool issues and series. So totally, dive in sometime, give them a read, and then totally pick up print issues too as well. That absolutely helps, lit magazine journals to pick up print copies. And yeah, so yeah, so just shared, my thoughts. I think they've done a great job with the website launch and updates. Over time, lit magazine journals typically they go under a lot of website revisions, gradually over the years. So I think it is really cool that they did that to improve the reading experience of past issues. And yeah, just some things to think about again. If you're listening to this and you may be thinking about creating your own lit mag journal, or an existing founding editor, or anything like that, right? It helps to see examples of a couple different layouts. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much it, in terms of Moss Puppy Magazine. I guess we're at the PS portion of the podcast, where I mention other things I may have forgotten to specify earlier or point out. So yeah, in terms of Moss Puppy's website magazine, right? There is no search on it to date, but that I guess that's predominantly because they have the embeds, versus like individual posts from the publication, right? As we've seen on some lit magazine journals, right? Like with 32 poems, a couple other ones, right? They link out individual pieces on the site, right? Available to read. And I think that is nice to do, and the specify the date and which issue it's from, but not every place does that. And yeah, I think again what they've done with the reading improvement, reading experience improvements with the embeds is nice. And yeah, there's no search on the website. I do like seeing searches on lit magazine journals websites, but that's predominantly if they do have a lot of posts, right? And publications tied to the issue in terms of poetry, visual art, like individually, published on the site as well, outside of the print issues, right? And yeah, so I think in addition to that, right, they do actually have a Patreon, and I saw it in the issues mentioned, so I just hopped over there, and yeah, so this is their Patreon. And again, some accounts on Patreon, I think you can not share, right, the membership numbers and stuff like that. So they have 13 posts thus far, and you can see what they've done. Is like issue 10's theme review just 4 days ago, right? So if you're interested in knowing in advance what the issue 10 theme is, right, then of course you could hop into Patreon, become a member, and know that in advance, right? So yeah, and to find the details of the theme and everything. They also have iPhone wallpapers, some fun unlockables, right? So yeah, I see more and more lit mags and journals doing this, like launching Patreons, right? So just something to be aware of, aside from the support section, right, where they had affiliates and sponsors listed and things of that nature. And what else? So, oh yeah, so in terms of like Read and their pop-up issues, I did mention this at some point in time on the podcast. Yeah, some lit magazine journals totally have done some pretty neat and interesting collaborations. So with Moss Puppy's pop-up issues, right? They did this one, Pride Pop-Up Volume 1, right? So they did this collaboration project, and I'm gonna mispronounce this, so I'm just gonna spell it out for you guys. The MINISON project, right? And I think it's Minison, the Minison project, right? And yeah, so it was a collaboration one that they did. And I think it shows here when you go to the site, right? Wild Willow magazine. So yeah, so it was yeah, so they just, did a collaboration together, right, to showcase writing and artwork by the LGBTQIA plus creatives, right? And so it was a collection of stories and artwork of life and love and loss, right? So I think that's really cool, collaborations like that. And, yeah. So it's something to think about, right, with your own lit mayor journal, right? If you want to do, maybe a main series and then do spin-off issues, maybe pop-ups like this. It's something to think about. I think it's cool. And, other special editions with your publication. It's always a lot of fun to do. So yeah, I didn't mention that, but I just wanted to tack that on. And yeah, so all in all, if you go out to, Moss Puppy Magazine's like Instagram, social media feed, right? I think absolutely great job of communicating statuses, issue releases, the stages and statuses of everything. There's also times totally where, on social media, they've been like, hey, fellow Lit Mags, share your calls, right? In the comment section, that aspect of community and supporting one another is there. You absolutely see that. So that's it. Again, we saw an ISBN in their issues, but literary magazines, series, right, can, also get ISSN numbers, right? And I have episode 12, which, covers ISBNs and ISSNs a little bit, and yeah, so just keep that in mind. It's not mandatory at all to have an ISBN or an ISSN number to, run a publication, or anything of that nature, but you want to think about those things, listen to episode 12 and maybe some of the other areas of this podcast, especially the distribution titled episodes, right? Where, I mentioned that, right, on how to get, the publication into more areas, maybe physical locations, right? Yeah. And always check the descriptions. I've been plugging in some updated links in there too of some of the Q&A episodes and screen shares. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I can think of. I also, want to point out, in terms of their issues, right? Moss puppy issues, the last thing I'll mention, right? So yeah, you may recall from a couple episodes back, I was talking about, how, yeah, some lit mags totally, in print, they have different length issues, right? Maybe they're not all, exactly the same number of pages, but they have the same number of sections, maybe the same number of pieces in each issue, but not necessarily. Nevertheless, I think it's important to keep that in mind in terms of page count consistency if you're going to branch out into predominantly like some subscription based platforms, because they do have, for some of those, right, that aren't free, right, they have like a digital per page cost upload fee, right? Not all of them, some of them are free to be onboarded to once they vet your publication. Then again, they do a split with you, right, over the subscription, but and subscriber amount, right, and all of that, but the sales from those purchases. But there totally are some platforms like that. So some totally look at your page counts that I've met with and stuff like that. But anyways, it's totally up to you whether you want to do that or not. But I think all in all, Moss Puppy is very consistent in terms of like the layout, the issues and everything. And yeah, the schedule they have is really cool. The themed calls is very unique calls that they have. The themes are a lot of fun to see, absolutely. And yeah, the very stellar photography and artwork. Yeah. So that's pretty much it, guys. So definitely hop into some of these issues, give them a read, pick up some print issues, give Moss Puppy Magazine a follow. They again have an upcoming call here, right? Of course, you could do the review on Patreon, or just mark it on your calendar, right? January 1st, right? They're gonna open back up in 2026. So yeah, it's gonna be cool to see. And yeah, again, they're very transparent on everything, it looks like, right, in their guidelines and under submit, right? So I will say, I think something I didn't mention under reading and responding, the process and timeline. So at the very bottom, right, you'll see here it says Moss Puppy Magazine does not send out tiered declines. So just keep in mind again. So every Litman journal has a different, review process, a little bit different, but typically, I've seen a lot of Litman journals do rounds of review or have some sort of voting system, as they stated, right, in Moss Puppy Magazine. So yeah, I just want to point that out. I think that was the one thing I didn't read off for you guys if you were maybe not seeing on my screen or watching the screen recording. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Some really cool themes again that they have, and unique publication overall, I must say. So yeah, just wanted to point out a couple things, and do check them out. Yeah. I have again been creating some spin-off articles. Again, I have been creating some articles tied to more so the Q&A portion of the series topics, so do check it out. I'll try and plug it in a couple other areas outside of Substack as well later on. And yeah, So that's pretty much it, guys. Again, made it to the 100th episode of the Lit Mag Lab. And yeah, so take care and check out more of Moss Puppy.